Seems we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. My name is Peter, and today we're going to talk about code gen for your data and actually from your data as well. Um, let's see what we have in store today. A couple of words before we get started. This is not a setup or a talk with a database or a cloud account, many fancy tools, etc. It's just a script with a couple of tools, and the target is for you at least to get a bit inspired, adjust it to your own use cases, or at the very least, see something cool for the day. So let's start. Let's start with just a couple of targets, or how may I call them? The status quo of things. The target zero is that engineers hate tracking tasks. So we need to make it less of a pain. The second is improve data quality, misspelling, missing updates of your data, and all this stuff that, at least from my experience, this happens day to day. I'm going to show something from the other talks as well. You can see that tracking engineers hate these things, or like they don't participate. This was from Christopher's talk just a bit before. No tracking engineers in the audience, so yeah, this begs the question. And for the second point, or the first one, if we leave this out for the public, is improving data quality. From Glenn's talk, the first that we had in the conference, we see all this amazing work that's been done for metrics and for cases and the cardinality we want to achieve. And then this becomes a really good artifact, but we need to implement it. That's when the tracking engineers come into play. From my experience, before we jump to the additional point, from my experience, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of miscommunication, lots of typos. That's pretty bad. Lots of typos, and certainly updates take a long time, and folks just get it wrong. So that's from my experience. The final target is, if we can, bake in input critical functionality. We have data, we want to pass it on to different platforms, GA4, Amplitude, Mixpanel, Snowplow, all the nice tools. One feature that seems to be pretty important is, for example, value reduction. You might have some PII data and so forth. We're going to see all those. To make this much more close to your use case, let's start with what I would consider the base. Let's say that we have a player entity. I will call this an entity because it represents some attributes. This player has a name attribute, which is the name that this player has. Some hit points. If folks know about like computer games, this is like your life points, and then a calling type, which is, it could be a warrior, it could be a monk. This is the initial requirement. This is the entity that we're using. The representation of these entities in most cases happens through JSON, or better yet, as a JSON schema, a YAML file. But anything that can turn into JSON or JSON schema fits the use case. So let's see the JSON schema that this entity might represent. This is a JSON schema. We have the title of a player, a description, player attributes, and then the properties that we've set. For those not familiar with JSON schema, every property can have some attributes describing it. So we have what type this thing is, a description, if it has a default value, the other attributes as well. This seems to be an integer with a default of 100, description, And then the calling type, which is an enum. It can take specific values. This is a starting point. And from here on now, we need to implement this entity in some way, depends on the use case, on our tracking tool, right? We need to send this entity on a tracking tool. We need to set this as a type. Let's see how we can help a bit the situation. Recently, I found out about a tool that's called QuickType, which is the basis of our solution. QuickType, it's basically a tool that you can give it a schema, and then it outputs, depending on the language that you want. It supports like many different languages. It can output certain structures that are helpful for the specific language. For example, for TypeScript, it can generate some types. For example, this would be the player type. By the way, this probably is a UI issue. This is the player type that, as you can see, has all the attributes that we have on our JSON schema. And for example, it adds the descriptions, has comments, strings. The enum is here. You can see it. Let's see now how we can use this to make this a bit more of our own, right? To adjust it to our processes. The process that I've seen, like this is like a small note. What I've seen in the past, and I'm guilty because I've used it as well. I've worked into agencies, data agencies. I've worked as an engineer doing the tracking and all the other stuff. Some things that I've seen is tracking docs. We have created those in the industry before, and the schema that you've seen goes like somewhere here. We send this to developers with implementation instructions. We write those by hand, and it can go wrong. Plus, it goes stale after probably a couple of weeks. Another solution is, for example, a Notion document that, again, some poor fellow that designed this data as the player data has to copy and paste the schema with some example values. And yeah, that's a total pain as well, and it goes stale. Let's see how we can use QuickType as a library together with a templating library. We're going to see this in a minute. How we can use those programmatically and adjust them to some code that we want to create. Let's go back to this features file, and I'm just gonna do a Command Z. So now you can see the features that we want to create. First up, we want to create some TypeScript compatible code to push an entity to the data layer using the QuickType library programmatically. Before we do that, I'm just going to show you this simple setup. I made it as simple as possible, and you can see more info about some boilerplate in some blog posts that these folks have created from QuickType. And it's just some simple code. You're reading some input. Here we have our JSON schema here in the local file system. We do this thing to just read it from the file system. Then we instantiate a new language. We saw language in the interface. You can see it here. We instantiate a new language, which for our use case, we're going to use the TypeScript language. And then the only thing that we do is that we run the QuickType API with some options that will affect the output. Let's just run this script. I have added this script in the CodeGen npm command. So if I do this, this just runs. And what we can see is that this is the output. The output is just added on a file which I've named tracking.ts, and this is exactly the output that QuickType gives us. So you can see you have everything here on the on this file as types and as the enums we've said, all good. Now, let's go into a more intricate thing. We want to create some TypeScript compatible code that pushes the player entity to the data layer. Let's see how we can do it. I won't go deep into how the code works and the boilerplate. Everything that we have here and the final state is on GitHub. It's already up there. So I'm just gonna give like a super quick overview of how QuickType uses this programmatically. In QuickType, there's a language, and this language uses a renderer, a language-specific renderer. What we want to do programmatically is we want to create a custom language that uses our custom specific renderer. And what we want to do specifically is override this renderer so that we can inject our code, which is the feature that we're designing. Again, to remind, the feature is creating TypeScript code to push an entity to the data layer. To do this, we're going to use, first of all, some custom TypeScript language. Most of this is boilerplate, but the important points are the following. We have created some custom TypeScript language from QuickType, and the only thing that we add is that we have added a generator function that we're going to supply to the class instance, and then this generator function is going to run. So let's see how this would go. I would change the language to my custom TypeScript language, and then I'm just going to pass the generator function. This generator function is a set of QuickType specific syntax and methods. You can find some info for these methods in the QuickType blog and, of course, the source code. And then, after we do our magic with this custom rendering function, what we do is that we gather the data that we're interested in and then use a templating solution. I use ETA. You can use handlebars, bug, Jade, whatever is of interest to you. And then with this template solution, we create a new output. And then we return it on basically the QuickType rendering function. This happens here. This emit source method says when you're about to emit the source code, emit what you would emit anyway, which is this part, and then add a new blank line, and then just call our generator function. So let's see what this does. If we have time, I will go into detail about the generator function. Let's see what happens. I'm going to show you the template that I have created, which is called data layer.eta. And basically this is templating syntax, and it says that for each type, create a method that's called push, interpolate the type name to DL, which means to data layer, and then expect the attribute to be of this type, and then push this object. This might be a bit tough to get around if you don't know any templating languages, but let's see what this does. Oh, let's go again. Probably we need to, this is a live demo, so these things happen. Let's see. Let's go here, and let's do probably this. Let's see if it will work. Nice, excellent. Yeah, that was it. Let's see now the tracking TS that we just created. Now you can see a function which is called push player to DL. This function may seem super simple. The thing that it does is that it provides the developers of a standard API that is also typed. That means if I am to push the player attribute into this function, I know exactly what I need to add. This is a string and it represents the name of the player, so like test, and then I have the hit points, which I already know that it's a number. So if I try to pass a string, this would complain. It would be, oh, this is not a string, it's a number. So this, and the thing that I love the most is the enums. If you go to calling type, you can select from this list of enums. So it would be like a warrior. And everything's good. Now, this could be the distributable file that you send to your colleagues. You may use it to create a library. You can do any sort of thing that you want. And it's fully customizable. The only thing that QuickType does is this part. And then using some of the QuickType APIs, we can just capitalize on those. And with the templating logic, this can be as big and complex as you want. Before we jump to the next feature, which is a bit more intricate, but I really love it, let's go and see the basic architecture of a program like this. You can have any type of JSON or JSON schema or anything you can transform to JSON. It could be table definitions. It could be anything you have in mind. It could be an OpenAPI server. It could be just files. It could be your APIs. We use this as input. And then what we pass to QuickType is a type of a language. You can generalize the script that you've seen and make it work with Java, make it work with Ruby, with TypeScript, with minimal changes. We add stuff from our own API. You might have some extra data you need to fetch. You might have some rules or anything like that. And the custom templating solution, which will help us to generate code that everyone can use. From this process, which we showed like the super bare bones, we can create custom SDKs that we can distribute all around the company. This can be added to an API or a server so that folks can go in the browser, add their schemas, and get some code. This can result to auto-generated docs based on the entities that we're using in specific parts of our company, or just custom code for folks to use. One thing that I found super important is how can we integrate data tests into front-end integration testing suites. That's really nice. And just as a note, we do this in Snowtype. You can design any kind of other tests if you want, like DBT tests, data flow tests, or the other. Now, for the second feature, which, at least to me, it's one of the more interesting ones. On our JSON schema definitions, there can be an attribute for each property with the type of PII boolean. This signifies that this information is PII, personally identifiable, and should be reducted from our tracking tools. How can we help? Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to modify the JSON schema and just add the PII attribute. This is not standard, by the way, but let's say that this is the way that we thought of using it. The second thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some code to our templating. It's pretty simple code. It's just that the templating might seem a bit weird to the eye at first. But what we're doing with this code is that we say, iterate the input object, and then find if any of these fields is a PII, and then change its value to like these triple stars, which is a reduction. Let's see how this can be done. This can be done with what the QuickType team calls an attribute producer. And again, most of this is boilerplate. The only thing that's custom is this one. It says that for each, let's say when an attribute is produced, add the information, make the information available of the raw schema of this type or attribute. What this practically means that when I'm generating my types, I will leave the rest of the logic for you to explore later, I have access to the whole schema. So what I can say is that when a type is about to be generated from QuickType, and the type is, let's say, the player type, when this happens, I want to find out what are the PII attributes of this type. This happens with a simple helper function. It's super simple. It could be more TypeScripty, but it's just for demonstration purposes. And let's see now what this will result in. Again, reminder that this happens from the definition. We set like a PII true. And now let's just try and generate the code and see what happens. Good. So going into this, by the way, this red stuff are just some TypeScript stuff. We can ignore it for now. What this will do is the following. We have this player function, and what the developer will do is push player to DL. They're going to add the attributes as we've seen before, which would be test. Let's add the hit point, 100, and then the calling type, which would be like a warrior. The result that's going to be pushed to the data layer is the following. Name, it's going to be redacted, and then the rest of the attributes are going to be as you see them above. That is really, really useful in cases that you want to make sure that something stays private. We don't want to leak this information to GA4, Mixpanel, Amplitude, or the like. So the developers don't need to implement this functionality. It's already baked in. They don't even need to know that this happens. And everything starts just from adding this. If I change this and add this to the, let's go to calling type and make this private as well, I'm just regenerating the code. And now what's gonna, probably I need a didn't save, so I just need to override, regenerate. And now we can see that both name and calling type, they're gonna be redacted. This can explode to a whole ton of other features. Let's see the final feature. I think I have just a bit of time to make it work, just to show you a bit of additional things you can do. Is feature 3, create a new template that tracks the entity as a Mixpanel event. So the steps to do it is create a new template, mixpanel.eta, I'm going to show it, and of course add automatic imports for the generated file, because this file, if used as a library for the tracking folks, needs to call Mixpanel properly. Let's see how this can be done. This is almost exactly the same template that you've seen from the data layer. The only thing that it does additionally is that it uses the Mixpanel API to track something. Let's change the template name as well to Mixpanel, regenerate, see what happens. Again, we keep the reduction because we want this to Mixpanel as well. And then what we can see as a new thing is a Mixpanel.track method track the player entity and then this player attribute that we have typed already. Now, what I'm missing is Mixpanel is not defined. And when you're using the browser library of Mixpanel, you need the imports. So what we can do is that we can add some additional methods to our renderer. By the way, this is, again, just to note, this is not magic. This is not some special account cloud tool thing. Everything's open source. So what I did is that I've added this method that says, before you emit the source code that you would emit this line, which says import Mixpanel from Mixpanel browser. If we rerun the template again, we can see that now there's this import. And if we had this on our project, it would work properly. The developers would just say, let me see if it would work here. They would just say track player, and then they would just pass the attributes. And reduction would happen, Mixpanel would work, and everything's going to be nice and typed. Now, this is just a demonstration. Hopefully you now have some inspiration and see how you can use a similar functionality for your use case. And just as a final note, it's pretty important to make sure that track engineers or the developers that need to implement this code, they really love you. Otherwise, yeah, your stuff are never going to get updated. As you can understand, you can update any type of property. This will be reflected on the generation, on the types. If we add a new property, it's going to be there as well. The types are going to be updated. And since we have Git in everything we do as developers, we can check that if there's a Git difference in this specific file that's auto-generated, open up a new pull request automatically and then inform us of this change. That way, we can connect our schema repository to our development code without the need for emails, tasks, all this type of stale things. And yeah, hopefully this will increase the data quality on your tracking journey. Yeah, that's basically it. If you folks have any questions, otherwise we're good to go. Thank you, Tim, for organizing this. And yeah, talk to you soon, folks. Thank you very much.